Welcome. I am Ian Lowe, technology executive, educator, and author of 2 AI governance frameworks that I will reference later in this series. This video is about the skill I believe is most at risk of being misunderstood in the current AI conversation, and most critical to develop deliberately. Judgment. Not judgment in the vague sense of good decision making. I mean something specific. The ability to determine which outcomes are worth pursuing. Not just which ones are most probable. AI is getting very good at the second. It is structurally incapable of the first. If you have been watching this series from the start, you have covered AI literacy, verification, and agentic governance. This video is where we go deeper into the kind of human thinking that no amount of AI capability replaces. If you are starting here, you do not need the earlier videos to follow this argument. What I am going to show you applies whether you work with AI daily or are just starting to think about what it means for your career. Here is the central question I want you to sit with. When an AI system recommends a course of action, and you have the authority to accept or override it, what do you actually use to decide? That question is what this video is about. Let us get into it. Let me draw a distinction that I think is one of the most important in this entire series. There are 2 fundamentally different kinds of judgment in professional life. The first is inferential judgment. Given the available information, what is most likely to happen? This is based on evidence, pattern recognition, and causal reasoning. It is the kind of thinking that produces. Based on these market conditions, demand is likely to fall in Q3. Or, given this patient's history, treatment X has the highest probability of success. AI is increasingly capable of inferential judgment. World models will make AI significantly better at it. The human advantage in this type of thinking is narrowing, and it will continue to narrow. The second is values-based judgment. Given the possible outcomes, which one should we pursue, and why? This requires a perspective, a set of commitments, a willingness to defend a choice on grounds other than the model recommended it. AI can simulate values-based reasoning. It can produce text that sounds like ethical deliberation. But it cannot hold a genuine values position, because it has no stake in the outcome. It cannot be accountable for the decision that follows, because accountability requires the possibility of being genuinely affected by consequences. These 2 kinds of judgment look similar from the outside. They are completely different in nature. And confusing them is one of the most dangerous things you can do in an AI-augmented organization. Let me give you a concrete example of what goes wrong when you confuse them. A hiring algorithm analyzes historical data and accurately predicts that candidates with a particular profile are 40% more likely to stay with the organization for more than 2 years. That is inferential judgment. It is working correctly. The historical data reflects a culture that has systematically underpromoted certain groups. The algorithm is optimizing for replication of past decisions, not for fair outcomes. The inferential judgment is accurate. The values judgment is absent. Someone has to decide. Do we want to replicate the past? Or do we want to build something different? That is not an empirical question. There is no data set that answers it. It requires a human being who has thought about what the organization should stand for, and who is prepared to be held accountable for that position. Better prediction of a biased outcome is not better governance. It is faster harm. So how do you actually develop values-based judgment? Because it is not something that happens automatically. It requires deliberate practice. I use a 5-question framework with my students. What outcomes are at stake? Not what outcomes the model predicts, but what outcomes are genuinely possible. And what would it mean for real people if each one occurred? Whose interests are affected? Name them specifically. Do not stay at the level of stakeholders. Which people, in which situations, with what at risk? What values are in tension? Most hard decisions are hard not because you do not know what is right, but because two things that are right are pulling in different directions. Name the tension explicitly. What would you be comfortable defending publicly? This is the accountability test. If this decision were examined, who would you explain it to? And what would you say? And finally, what does this decision say about the kind of professional you are choosing to be? That last question sounds like a philosophy exercise. It is actually the most practical of the five. Professional identity is a real constraint on decision-making. People make better decisions when they are explicitly connected to who they are trying to become. Here is the part of this argument that I think people miss. As world models develop and AI becomes better at predicting consequences, values-based judgment does not become less important. It becomes more important. Here is why. When you can predict outcomes accurately, the question, what should we pursue, becomes sharper, not easier. If I can tell you with high confidence that this decision will produce outcome A, and this other decision will produce outcome B, the question of which we should choose is not resolved by that information. It depends entirely on what we value. Better prediction reveals the values question more clearly. It does not answer it. The professionals who will matter in a world of highly capable AI are not the ones who can outpredict the model. That game is already over. They are the ones who can look at what the model predicts and say, yes. And here is which outcome we are pursuing. And why, and I am prepared to defend that choice. That is the skill. It is entirely human. And it gets more valuable as the tools get more powerful. Most professionals have not developed this skill because they have not needed to. The structure of organizations and industries has absorbed most of the hard values decisions, distributed them across committees, and made them no one's explicit responsibility. AI is dismantling that structure. The decisions that were once absorbed by process are now arriving at individual desks, with a recommendation attached and a cursor blinking. Accept or override? You need to have an answer. Not a reflexive one. A considered one. Develop the habit of asking, am I making an inferential judgment or a values judgment right now? If it is a values judgment, am I actually engaging with the values? Or am I deferring to the output? Next video, we talk about communication. Specifically, what makes human communication irreplaceable in a world where AI can write fluently, negotiate persuasively, and simulate empathy convincingly? There is an answer. It is not what most people expect. I am Ian Lowe. See you in the next one.